Well, big thank you to Simon for being here, for one of our speakers again at Childhood Potential Conference. I'm really glad that you are here and that you are coming back and supporting the event.
Absolutely. I'm so excited to always jump into this conference. It's my favorite. Thank you for having me and inviting me again.
I will say a few words at the beginning about you. Feel free to add anything if I'm missing something. You are one of the best-selling Montessori authors. You started with your book Montessori Toddler, then you co-authored Montessori Baby together with Junifa, and then The Montessori Child. You have over 600,000 copies sold worldwide and translated into more than 30 languages. Wow. Can you imagine 600,000 people reading
I
reading
know the
these
book's having a
words?
life of its own. I don't understand it myself, but I'm super happy that it's helping many people find Montessori. So it's great.
You are an AMI Montessori trained educator, both in the classroom. You have the experience both in the classroom and at home with your two children, now young adults. You run Jacaranda Tree Montessori in Amsterdam, a Montessori playgroup. You have a popular Instagram account, blog, podcast. You sell online courses. The website is the Montessori Notebook. What did I forget? Tell me something more. Yeah.
But honestly, that is my life. And the one thing is like it sounds like a lot, but actually my life is very simple. And my favorite thing is to get on my bike and cycle to my classes in the morning, and then in the afternoon I might do some work. So it is actually. I have a dog, Blue. You might hear her bark and agree with me during the conference tonight. That's it. Thank you.
Today's topic that we have is My Freedom Ends Where Yours Begins, teaching our children to live in a community. Why did you choose this topic? Why do you think it's important to talk about this?
Okay, well, firstly, I love that quote, and I can't give credit to who said it because it's hard to find the original source. But my freedom ends where yours begins is such a beautiful way of understanding that freedom doesn't mean you can do whatever you like, that gives you license. There are in Montessori freedom within limits or freedom with responsibilities. And I wanted to explore, what does independence look like when we actually also live in community with others? And it's not something that we talk about a lot. Like if I said to most people in this room, what do you think of when you think of the word Montessori? Most people would write down independence. And I think that's very true. We do teach these children to be capable and to look after themselves. But we also do that so that they can look after themselves, the environment, and others in their community. So I thought I'd bring that topic to the table, and I'm really curious what your questions are and if we can explore it together.
Well, the first question is, when do you consider a child to be in a community? Because parents may often say that they aren't really playing with each other together when they are under 3 years.
Should we pop it in the chat? Should we ask people that question? Like, when do you
Okay,
consider a
yes.
child is in community? It would be interesting to get people's feedback. When do you think they are in community? I think it's a really interesting one as well, because I have people visit, I work, my play group is for 14-month-olds to 3-year-olds. And I sometimes have people visit who are from the 3 to 6 classroom or something like that, and they don't understand the toddlers and, what's going on here. This parallel play, they're not playing together, that kind of thing. Jennifer from birth, being with relatives, family, cousins, and from birth. Yeah, exactly. So I totally agree. Marie just says too, if they have older siblings, especially children in community from birth, learning from them as part of their environment. Ashley says, for the root of the question about respecting others' freedom, it would be applicable as soon as they're building a relationship. For Ida, Chono Domenico, from Guam. Wow, that's amazing. Welcome, everybody. From birth, first with their mother, skin to skin, then gradually expanding. So I can understand why someone would say 2 years old, because that's when they're relating, and the freedom within limits, definitely they're learning about their boundaries and things when they start to be in that more relationship. But for the word community, yeah, I would say from birth. You could even say from in utero. So because when you have an older sibling, for example, and you encourage them to talk to the baby, to we sing our songs and things like that, they're already in our family and they're in our community even when they're in utero. So that could also be true. But it's really interesting that we think about the first family being community, you know, like our family environment, whatever that looks like, that would be their first community because they're learning from us, they're seeing us interact with each other, we're interacting with them, they're learning. Not only if I touch something and the ball moves, they're also learning if I say something, how do people respond to me? And that's like their first community. And then the community grows, doesn't it? As the child gets older, like for example, they come to a playgroup class or they go to a daycare and their community becomes bigger. And then the 3 to 6 year old, it becomes even bigger. They might go to preschool and not be with their parents at all. That environment becomes another community and they're starting to play together. They're trying it out to see what it looks like, where a lot of in the 0 to 3 environment, a lot is parallel play. They love being with each other. They're learning all the time, younger children and older children. And we're encouraging that community, like how can we help our friends, making snack for each other and those kind of things as well. And then of course, once you get to 6 to 12 year olds, I notice there's quite a few families with older children. So I can mention all the age groups, even though I know we're focusing in this conference on the 0 to 3 child. 6 to 12 year olds, you know, that is one part of their personality is that they need to be in community. And I love seeing it's almost like a noisy atelier when you go into a 6 to 12 classroom because they're not quiet workers anymore. They're talking, and half of their work is organizing themselves and how we're going to attack this project, you know, and how we're going to take it on. And of course, then the adolescent, as they get older, they're looking at their community. How can I give back to my community? How can I stand for a cause that I believe in? As they're still being part of our family unit as well.
Thank you. You already said that when it comes to Montessori, many people connect it with independence. How is the importance of independence when you consider being it in a community?
You know, the reason we teach our children independence is so they can be capable and so they learn how to construct themselves and to be in and then to become a citizen in society. So there's the independent child, but they're in the community so that when they get older, as they grow, they're basically learning to look after themselves, but they're also wanting to eventually look after their friend and to look after our earth and our environment and how we even look after each other in the family. So in Montessori, it's not such a hierarchical structure where the parents are in top and the children are bad below. It really is that triangle that we see in our Montessori training with the adult and the child and the environment in a dynamic relationship. And that's what we are basically laying the foundation for in the first 3 years. But as you go on through 3 to 6 and 6 to 12, you know, you see it even more, how they are trying out their freedoms, but then how do I manage that in society? So for example, yeah, when you only look at independence, that the child's working on their activity or doing it by yourself, you might think that child's lonely even, you know, or that they're not going to develop social skills. And I think that's something that's sometimes can be a misconception about Montessori. And so I love being able to be here tonight and to talk about this topic about what does it actually look like to be in community instead. I mean, we talked about the mixed age group. So you have the younger children who are watching and they adore the older children, and the older children are helping the younger children. And that might even just be maybe under 3 years old, they're not going to give them a lesson, but anytime they help a younger child, they're consolidating what they know. So it's not a waste of their time, you know, because some people might say, you know, 3 to 6 classroom, well, my child's here to learn. Actually, you know yourself, if you're learning for a test or you have to explain something that you work on, if you can't explain that to somebody else, then you know you haven't actually mastered it yet. So you consolidate, you master, and you can pass it on your wisdom to the next person. So the mixed age group is part of the community. Having only one of each material in a Montessori classroom was really a particular choice that Dr. Montessori made, and it means that it prevents competition, interestingly enough, because if you don't have two children building towers at the same time, you can't say mine's bigger than yours, you know, or who's faster or who does it better. You have one material. That's a really interesting choice, and it has a very big impact on community. The other thing that one material in the classroom means that you have to learn to wait your turn. And you also have to learn to use the materials correctly. Like you bring them out, you put them on your mat, and then you put them back so they're ready for the next person. Because if there's unlimited activities and those kind of things around, then you might not actually see why you need to put them back. So that's why the freedoms and limits and the freedoms and responsibilities just work together so beautifully when you have this very carefully prepared Montessori environment. So I'm talking about a classroom, but the same principle can apply to your home. So for example, if you have twins or you have siblings, you don't need to buy 3 of the same thing. You can actually, the children can learn to wait their turn or to find a way to collaborate, to work on the material together. Another big part of like independence in community is that we all, one of our favorite activities anyway in my classroom is preparing snack, and we all are going to eat, and they're all learning to master spreading and cutting the banana and squeezing orange juice, and we're all excited for each of the skills that the children are learning. But I'm reminding them every time, oh, we're making them for friends, and particularly as they want to eat it in them, put it into their mouth, and then I just remind them, oh, it's for our friends, it goes on the plate here. And if they take a bite, then there's a very gentle way to say, oh, I'll keep that in a bowl for our snack time later, and we remove it. So they're gradually learning that we take care of it, and those that we are going to eat it later and take care of our space. What's really fun as well is sometimes I might just say, oh, who helped make the banana today? And some of the older children will really be excited to say, I did it. So again, you've got this child very excited about what they contributed, and they're learning to be in community. And even some of the favorite Montessori activities are like cleaning the spaces. I love having the mops and everything at the child's height so they can go and take care of the space. And I've even seen an older child, for example, mopping the floor for the younger ones. And so again, that's being in community. I have also seen independently, that just while we're on the topic of cleaning, a child getting a jug of water and pouring it on the floor. And you're like, this is interesting. I'm going to see what happens here. And then they go and get the mop, and then they mop it up, and then they repeat it. So they're actually like mastering mopping. But it is nice to see when those skills of independence being moved to the community, which is starting to mop up someone else's skills. It's not even just your own. And like, it's the sweetest when, say, someone drops an activity and, the pieces go 100 different directions. And then I might model saying, oh, can I help you? And I'll start. And then before you know it, there's 3 or 4 children also helping to collect all the pieces. So there's some examples of like independence, but also in community.
Thank you. We always try to follow the child. How do we balance this with being with others in community? For example, when we are in a restaurant or when we are with others.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting because I think that when you think of us only focusing on our child and following the child, in a way, maybe dangerous is the wrong word, but I kind of think it's dangerous because we're thinking about our child at the exclusion of anyone else. So we're basically focusing on individualism instead of community. So what I love is, yes, let's follow our child. So for example, my child wants to climb, or they want to make noise, or they need movement when they're in the cafe. And there are other people who have a need for rest and quiet, and they're listening to the people that they're talking to, and they don't want children to be running around beside them if they haven't chosen to. So I think it's always like, if we're in public, like a cafe, then I want to find a way that my child can get their needs met and everyone else can have their needs met, and it's not at one of the exclusion of the other. So, for example, it might be as simple as, thinking, okay, my child is busy when they're in cafes, and I'm going to take along some activities that are interesting to them. So I, for example, used to take a little pencil case and had like some vehicles and some of their favorite kind of things to play with while we were waiting. And I had always a notebook and a pen in there, and we'd play drawing games. And as they got older, we'd play boxes and, those kind of, just games in notebooks. They could do sketches, other things like that. And if they do need to start moving, then I might, for example, head out of the cafe and go for a quick walk around the block. Or they might just only need a little bit of a walk, and then I'll go and we'll maybe see the people who are working in the kitchen. Or we might just go and sit by the window and watch the vehicles going past. And knowing that I need to take care of my child's needs, but it doesn't have to be at the expense of everybody else. So it's my responsibility. And honestly, if they get to the point where their behavior is not appropriate, we may have to leave. Like, and for example, in the library, like if they're being too loud in the library and we can't get them to stop being loud in the library, then we're going to have to say, our behavior is not appropriate now, and we're going to have to leave because there's other people's needs that we need to consider right now. One thing that's a good tip for the library is that my children were loud in the library, and I said, we're very quiet in the library. And they said, no, we're not. I said, should we go and ask the librarian? And so we went and found one of the people who worked there, and we went and said, are we loud or quiet in the library? And they said they're very quiet. And then my children just was like, oh, okay, straight away. So you can also go to the person in charge and check. And the other thing, like, for example, you can do the same if you're visiting grandma's house and like the children are used to going upside down and you're saying, well, I'm following the child, they like to go do somersaults. And in our house, it's fine if they're on the couch and they do a somersault, but maybe at grandma's house, she doesn't like that. So we can always check, oh, grandma, is it okay if the children go upside down here? And she can say yes or no as it feels appropriate. If she says no, well, then we say, it sounds like grandma doesn't like it when we do. We're going to have to find something else to move your body in a way that's okay for grandma. Grandma, is it okay if we roll on the floor? Or can we roll up this carpet and balance along that? Or can we use this draft snake to, balance along or something like this? So it's always finding ways that keep your child interested and allow others to have their needs met. Yeah, and then your children will learn that we respect them, but we also respect other people as well.
There is one first question from Anam in the chat. At what age can children start to do their own work or do some work around the house, like mopping, according to Montessori?
So honestly, once they're walking steadily, they might be interested in helping around the house. And so you can set up the environment already with a little broom and a mop and a dustpan and brush and things like that. And so I've definitely seen children as young as 12, 14 months who are interested in the mop. They may not be executing the task to perfection in that they're doing their own work, but they're definitely trying the movement. And so some tips is to really do it, show them in a way that they're going to have success. So put 2 hands on the mop and say, watch. And then just push it very slowly as you show them. You don't have to talk and say what I'm saying right now. You just say watch, and then you just show them. And then what's really fun is that once they get interested, there might be just a tiny bit of water, and I say, oh, and this one. And then they mop that little drop, and then you say, and this one, and they mop this little drop. And it's not because I want every single drop to be mopped up, and just showing them like the attention to detail and their small parts and things like that, they find really interesting. And then they get to repeat, and then they improve their mastery. And then over time, it's the process over the product from 0 to 3, but by 3 to 6, they're starting to actually get to actually clean it. And by 6 to 12, they're more interested in cleaning because it makes something clean as opposed to for the movement and the repetition. So hopefully that helps. So really just follow your child and their interests, and otherwise you can model it as well.
When it comes to community, we talk about freedom and limits. Can you give us some examples of freedoms and limits in the classroom for the younger children, for the toddlers?
Yeah. So one that comes to mind is taking turns with the activities. So like I said, there's one activity type in our classroom. So the children are going to need to take turns with it. And basically, the older children often will take the activity to a table, they'll sit at the table, and then they'll return it when they're done. With younger children, it can get more confusing because they may still work at the shelf when they don't have as much concentration to take it away yet. And so that can be more difficult. But basically, they have a freedom to choose anything they like in the classroom, as long as someone else isn't working on it, and they take it back when they're finished. So that's the freedom. You can work with anything you like. But the limit is that you can't touch it, someone else's work unless you ask permission, can I play with you, and the other person agrees. And usually that doesn't happen until they're above 2.5, that kind of thing anyway. It may be younger if you have siblings involved, but they mostly have this puzzle and they want to master it, right? Because they're under 3 and they're constructing themselves, so they're repeating it until they've mastered it. And if you take one piece of my puzzle, I can't complete the puzzle. So the first thing that when I first heard this and finished my Montessori training, I thought that really meant that I had to be super strict, and that every time I saw a child coming nearby another child, I would say, it's their turn, it's their turn. And, I was kind of almost policing the situation. And after many years in the Montessori classroom, I worked in Montessori for over 20 years, I find myself observing first, because there might be a 14-month-old and a 2.5-year-old, and the 14-month-old is curious, but they'll lose interest anyway. They're just interested because the other child's playing with it and they manage it themselves. Actually, that's more beneficial, because the older child may be able to say, it's my turn, it'll be available soon, or show them what they're doing and then continue working. They might be able to solve it themselves. But if they do start to pull the activity towards them, then I might say, oh, did you want to say it's my turn? And so then I can help them to set their limit with their friend, like it'll be available soon, I love to say as well, because then the child hears not, no, it's not, you can't play with this. They hear they get to have a turn, but when I'm finished. And then maybe I might even facilitate, if I can see another child's having time, shall we let you know as soon as they're finished? And, we can translate for them, but we're helping them to set the limit, that everyone knows that if they've started an activity, they can work with it for as long as they like, and then when they're finished, then they can move on. And this helps build concentration, because we're living in an attention deficit society. And actually, when we allow a child to work with it for as long as possible, then they actually do get to master the activity that they're concentrating on right now. So yeah, I think that's probably how I tackle that one. And then even like little things like freedoms, like I can move around the classroom as I want, but if I can't walk over someone's mat, so you might want to teach someone how you walk around a mat. That could be like a freedom within limits. And even as I was talking about before, when we're preparing snack and someone wants to eat the crackers, there's the freedom to help us prepare the crackers and to master their movements. But as soon as they start to eat it, then we might just say, oh, it's for our friends, it goes on the plate here. And again, any of these limits that we set, particularly for young children, you have to be able to be consistent and predictable, to say it again and again and again. So I say at least probably 4 times a day, oh, it's for friends, it goes on the cracker, as they start to bring the knife to their mouth. It goes on the cracker. And when you say it in that positive way, they hear what you want them to do rather than what you don't want them to do. Yeah.
There's a nice question from Lavanya. How can we teach children to understand the concept of personal boundaries and how they can relate to respecting others' space and choices?
Oh, that's really cool. The thing that comes to my mind is consent. When I hear this question, I'm not sure exactly if that's what Lavanya is talking about. But for example, what comes to my mind is there's some children who love hugging other children, and there's other children who don't want to be hugged, for example. And so I love to, again, translate for people and say, oh, it looks like you want to hug them. Let's check with them if they want to be hugged right now. And then say the other child, you're reading their body language, they're not able to communicate it. You can say, it looks like they're not enjoying that right now. But do you know who likes to be hugged? I love to be hugged. Would you like to hug from me? So or should we find someone else that like to be hugged? So I'm acknowledging and I'm kind of teaching them that that we ask, we check. And the same can be for anything. So rather than walking up to someone and taking what they want, again, we're translating between them. It looks like you'd like a turn. Let's check if they're all done. Are you all done? No, they're not. And so you can use the same language even on the playground. It's not language that other people will be used to, but they'll appreciate you checking that they can wait for their turn and those kind of things. And you can also, it's okay to stand up and say, it'll be available soon. It's my turn. And, teaching your child to put their hands on the hips, particularly if they're a little smaller, that kind of thing. Let me read the question again. How can we teach children to understand the concept of personal boundaries and how they relate to respecting other spaces and choices? Yeah, I think that is kind of, I think, the thing that we're translating if they're not able to. And then over time, they're going to be able to do that more and more. And we'll talk maybe later about grace and courtesy lessons, but this is something, if it comes up a lot, you can really practice and you're modeling. For children under 3, like a grace and courtesy lesson is something that you can model, and then 3 to 6-year-old, you might make it a more formal, like little lesson or game or something like that in your home. But I think that over time, they learn to respect your boundaries as well. So for example, I love to say I'm cuddling one child and another child wants to cuddle as well. I can say, oh, I'll be available soon. I'm just hugging Oliver now. And as soon as I'm finished, you can have a turn. And so they're also learning, about, we're modeling that in our own relationships and how we speak with each other. So I think that would be another way about personal boundaries and spaces and things like that. And, when children also touch themselves, for example, and they're sitting in the middle of the living room, you can say, oh, it's okay to touch yourself, but we go to the bathroom. That's something we do in private. So that's another kind of consent. If an adult wants to hug your child and your child doesn't want to be hugged, then you can also model it that way too. Do you want to be hugged right now? Oh, you don't feel like being hugged right now? Okay, thanks for letting us know. Let me know if you want to say hi later. My daughter, for example, had really blonde curly hair and everyone wanted to touch her hair, right? And she didn't like it at all. So I again had to translate for her. And that again is teaching her personal boundaries, how she'll be able to say it for herself when she's old enough.
Perfect. You already started talking about grace and courtesy, so maybe let's jump to that question.
Yeah.
Is it too early to start with grace and courtesy lessons with children under the age of 3?
Yeah, so quickly, I guess, to say what grace and courtesy lessons are, because it's such a Montessori thing that I just talk about, but maybe some people haven't heard that term before. And it's kind of just a way to say manners, I guess, as well. It's how do we behave gracefully? How do we show courtesy to others? And it's really mostly known for 3 to 6-year-old children, because they have these formal lessons like how to roll up a mat. We do that in our Montessori training for 0 to 3, but we're more modeling than saying this is how we roll up the mat. It might be how you walk around a mat. It might be saying thank you. It might be apologizing. So there's many grace and courtesy lessons like that. But for a child under 3, I do everything by modeling, and I'm just, thank you very much. Would you like some? Yes, please. Yeah. And I'm not nodding my head as the child is, so they can maybe say yes that way, instead of yes, please. And I hear a lot of parents saying, do you want to say yes, please? Say please, say thank you. And actually, they do better just to say thank you themselves. Oh, thank you for giving her some banana. And because it's they've got the absorbent mind, they're picking up everything in their space, including our how to be grateful, how to apologize, and all of those things. We have many opportunities to model that instead. I love actually Alison Oars. She's a 6 to 12 trainer, AMI trainer. And when I was doing my 6 to 12 assistance certificate, she would always say that if you notice that a child doesn't have a skill yet, it's not because they're lazy or whatever. They just haven't mastered that skill yet. So again, it's an opportunity to say, okay, I notice my child's not saying thank you, and how can I give them more opportunities to practice that? So for example, before a birthday party and the child's turning 3 or 4, that kind of thing, you could say, oh, when someone gives us a present, it's very nice to say thank you. And we can practice that now and see how it feels from, I'm going to pretend to give you a present and then you can say thank you, and you can kind of role play it. And you hope that then at the party they might remember it. And otherwise you should say, thank you so much for the gift. I think they're going to really enjoy it. And again, you're modeling it. And then, okay, they didn't do it yet. So then it just gives me more information that they haven't mastered it yet and that we're going to need to keep practicing. You can also use grace and courtesy lessons when it comes to movement and controlling movement, how to walk around furniture, those kind of things, but also like if you see a kid slam a door. So the first thing we want to do when a kid slams the door is that we think, oh, we need to correct them right in that moment. And so we say, don't slam the door, or we kind of give them a lecture, or we want to show them even in a Montessori way right then. But particularly if they're over 3, you could come back to it later. Like, I noticed you slammed the door earlier. Watch, I want to show you something. And you close it as quietly as you can, and so that you can hardly hear it. And you're like, oh, that was really quiet. Can you do it as quiet as that? And then we're like trying to be a mouse and that kind of thing. So a grace and courtesy lesson doesn't have to always be about manners. It can be about how you also might shut something. It could be also how you excuse yourself from the table, So in our family, what do we do? And, basically you can come up with your own way of deciding. I think children under 3 usually don't sit at the table indefinitely. They usually, when they're done, I might offer them the plate and then they take their plate to the kitchen to show that they're done. And then children over 3 might more join the family conversation. But how do you excuse yourself when you want to leave the table? So it can be things like that. It might be introducing themselves to people. It might be how you sneeze, that you sneeze into your elbow. One of my favorites as well is when you're eating at mealtime, asking each other to pass the plates, oh, can you pass me the beans, please? So you get an opportunity. Even if I don't want beans, I often will just ask for something on the other side of the table just for practice with young children. Can be really nice. Or One that I use with family members sometimes is, oh, I really want to hear what you're saying. Can you repeat that when you finished your mouthful? And so it's just a really nice way to say, oh, I can't hear you, but they get another chance when they don't have food in their mouth. And the more they hear that in our house, then it's much better than nagging them, don't eat with your mouth full, that kind of thing as well. And actually, one of the free PDF downloads for the conference, I made a list of grace and courtesy activities. So if you check Lucy's all the freebies and things like that, you'll find like a list of grace and courtesy activities, so people can download that.
I think it's in the premium pass, so it's for those who
Ah, okay.
have decided to buy the
Advertisement for the
premium
premium
pass.
pass.
Perfect. There's one more question. You talked about the classroom and the freedoms and limits in the classroom, and you somehow talked about, the prepared environment in a way that there is only one activity in the classroom. Children have to wait their turn. How can we set up the physical environment at home also, to encourage independence and social responsibility? It is different a little bit, and there were actually two questions also in the chat that were going back to this question with freedom and limits going back to home. So can we go there?
Yeah, okay. I'll answer that question, and then maybe if it doesn't
Yes,
cover what the people in
yeah,
the
of
question, I
course.
didn't actually see the chat yet, then we'll
Don't
go there.
worry.
But the thing that comes to mind the most when I'm setting up the physical environment at home is that place for everything and everything in its place, because that gives the child the possibility to have independence. They can find everything, they know where it belongs, it's accessible. And that's one thing, like in Montessori classrooms, how you walk in and the children can take exactly what they need when they need it. And it also helps children to have a sense of order and to put things back, which you can build on as they get older, because at a certain age, particularly the 6 to 12-year-old child, is not interested in external order anymore, but they know where things belong. So that enables them to put things back so that it's then living in our family. It makes it nice for everyone. So I think of 6 to 12 children because they love big work and they like to create quite a little bit of mess because they use every single, like, for example, if they're in paper planes, they might just not fold one paper plane, but they'll make 20 different types of aeroplanes, and your house might be covered in aeroplanes. But how do they then tidy up so that it's okay for the whole family? So then you kind of like, this is a place for everything and everything is placed. So you're welcome to make this big work as long as it's all tidied up by the time that it's dinner. Or for example, I remember one school holidays, we had no plans in the school holidays, and our children had quite a few different Lego sets and they wanted to create a Lego city in our living room. And I'm like, that sounds like so much fun, and I really want you to do that. And I'm sure that by the end of the holidays, I'm not going to enjoy this anymore. So let's do that with the agreement that at the end of the holidays, it gets packed away back in where it all goes. And they were like so up for that. And I still remember it was such a special thing. But again, it's knowing what my limits are as well, so that we can make agreements that work for everybody in the family. Even if you think about like your laundry basket. So a lawn hamper, I don't know what you call it in different parts of the world, but where you put your dirty clothes. So we always had our laundry basket in the bathroom, so that when the children had their bath, I would maybe carry the top and they might carry their pants, and they put them into the laundry basket. And when they do that, then they're learning where everything goes. And honestly, this is the smallest thing, but a teenager being able to put their clothes in the laundry basket is so helpful because you don't have to nag them. And like, I think I had to say to Oliver once, oh, I haven't seen your sport clothes for Saturday. And he's like, that's okay, I'll go put them in the laundry basket, because I was happy to do their laundry as long as it was in the laundry basket. I never had to go and get like clothes out of their basket. So that's how we can use a physical space to also make it work for the whole family, if that makes sense. And then I guess the other thing would be like, how do you share activities in your home? And in our house, my kids were 1.5 years apart. So they basically liked playing with the similar things. And so I decided that the rule in our house would be similar to a Montessori classroom, in that they would share by taking turns, that they didn't have like Oliver's toys and Emma's toys, but it was kind of just a pool of toys. Maybe just like if someone had a birthday, then they'd have like the special things for a couple of weeks, but it would gradually just all go into the general pool. And then if someone was really working on something, then they could work with it for as long as they liked. But if someone else wanted to have a turn, like if they wanted to play together sometimes, then that was also fine. So but it was the same kind of idea that no one had to share unless they wanted to, and whoever started with it could choose if they wanted to play with someone else, but otherwise they'd put it back when they were finished and someone else could take a turn. And that worked really well. But if you're not clear, then the children can't be clear either. So if some days you say sharing, in Dutch, they say samen spelen, samen delen, which means sharing together, playing together. And if you say that some days, but other days you go, oh no, this Montessori thing, they have to share by taking, like it's going to be super confusing. So just decide so you can be consistent in your home, I guess, as well. So I'm curious about like everyone's questions as well. I'm not sure
Yeah.
how much we.
I will first read, if you don't mind, question from Nabila Putri.
Mhm.
Uh, when a child starts to learn from role modeling, and how do we know if our child learned or catched the proper model if the little child cannot speak yet?
Yeah, it takes a lot of trust, right? But basically, from the set, maybe in utero, but from the time they're born, they're lying on a perhaps, kicking legs, but they're